Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
We are pleased to bring you this special series on Unity Online Radio. To learn about other series, go to unityonlineradio.org and click on Special Series.
Welcome to a special series, The Three Faces of God, with co-hosts Karen Kelly and Reverend Ellen Davenport, author of The Five Principles. They'll be exploring the different aspects of the divine that show up in world religions and in unity. No matter what you think about God now, stay tuned for new ideas on The Three Faces of God.
Hello and welcome again to The Three Faces of God. I'm Ellen Davenport. I'm here with Karen Kelly. Karen, you're up there in Chicago?
I sure am. Are you down there in sunny, beautiful Wimberley?
Yeah, sunny and beautiful. We'll affirm that summer is just beautiful. It's so hot already. But we have a great series going here. This is our third show out of 6. And in the first 2, we I think, thoroughly explored the three faces of God. It's an idea that comes from Ken Wilber, that there are different ways to view God. Just basically, God is all that is. God is within us. And then we can also be in relationship with God. And he says, none of the major religions have ever emphasized all three. They usually pick one or two and then disdain the others. And so we've been talking about how to incorporate all three faces of God into our own spiritual lives. And last week we talked a long time with Paul Smith about how Jesus used all three, because he talked about God, to God, and as God. So all of that's been great. If you haven't heard those shows, I'd advise you to go back and listen. But what does it mean for us? What's in it for me? How do we experience all three of the faces? So that's what we'll be talking about today with our guest, Kelly Isola. Karen, tell us more.
Ooh, we're really lucky today, Ellen, because Reverend Kelly Isola is with us, and this is a woman who is on a mission. She is on a mission to inspire, awaken all of us into a greater experience of our divinity through the wholeness of our human experience. And she's a consultant, she's a speaker, she's an author, and she's a radio show host. She's using many vehicles to share her passion for what she calls the twofold path of an engaged spiritual life, so that we can embrace our inner path of wisdom and we can demonstrate an outer path of compassionate service. These are pretty heady objectives here. Kelly holds a Master of Divinity from Unity Institute, as well as many, many, many certifications from leading edge models of human development. And her specialty, she's well known for being an expert in the spiritual practice of conflict transformation and resolution. She's also the co-author of the best-selling book, Who Have You Come Here to Be? 101 Possibilities for Contemplation. She co-hosts a radio show called The Minister and the Mother on blogtalkradio.com. She has her own website at kellyisola.com. She is funny, inspiring, charismatic. But the most important of all of these things is that she is the mother, the doting mother of Murray, a very intelligent, highly loved, and very happy, content cat. So we are very, very happy.
What an introduction.
Yeah, I'm so glad you got that last part in there. That's the most important.
You know, I met Murray on several occasions, and I know that's what it's all about. So in the meantime, we thought maybe we would delve a little bit more deeply into the second component of the three faces of God, and that is what you love to talk about, is the experiencing God in our own lives, not just talking about what the three faces of God are intellectually, but what they really feel like to us when we experience each of these faces ourselves. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that what you want to?
Yeah, I think we've gotten in many ways, not just, I mean, whether you're talking about within Unity or in the integral world or whatever organization or group of people, we've gotten in our world and in our culture, I think in part because the world is changing so rapidly and we're just sort of, revelation is, moment to moment, constantly evolving and changing and we're immersed in it, is that it for me, I don't want to hear any more theory. I don't want to hear any more. It's the phenomenological piece that I think is most important, the piece where we experience, because it's from experience that we then, contribute to creating a world that works. It's not through the information, and theory is good because it gives us, some knowledge and a place to start. But I think it's the experience that impacts us, that changes us, that transforms us, that, from within to without.
Yep. Well, we're going to spend the whole hour talking about that, with the exception of one little tangent that I want to step aside for a minute. Just because many Unity people, and certainly students in Unity Institute, we've been exposed to Ken Wilber's integral philosophy and spirituality and Don Beck's spiral dynamics, and we kick around some of these phrases on occasion. And I just wanted to ask you, for those people and also for our new listeners, ask you to talk a little bit about the map versus the territory, that these are constructs to understand and describe our growth, and also talk a little bit about the stages of development versus the states of consciousness, just to set a stage for our discussion today.
Okay, so that was a ginormous question.
I know.
So, I'm glad to see Ellen smiling, because I
Just
know
in a
she
nutshell,
thought the same
Kelly.
thing. Yeah.
Ken Wilber, spiral dynamics, and the state of consciousness.
Right, but I've already talked to her, and I know she can do this, so this is not.
I know
a
she
problem.
can too.
So what I would say about to just for people, anybody that's listening, and whether it's hopefully we'll listen to the entirety of the 6-part series here, and anytime that you come across information regarding Ken Wilber, integral theory, spiral dynamics, Don Beck, is to always remember that integral theory or spiral dynamics are what we refer to as a map. And it's just like any map. You're on vacation in the car and you have a map that tells you how to get from Fort Wayne to Kansas City, Missouri, wherever you are, that it shows you where the highways are, the back roads, the lakes, the mountains. You can see the territory, the where you're going. And so in something like integral theory, spiral dynamics are the map that we take into a particular territory. For instance, the territory of like what we're delving into here around religion, the territory of psychology, the territory of healthcare, the territory of education. And what integral theory and what spiral dynamics are maps for is they map out the development and the evolution of human psychology, of human consciousness. The, spiral dynamics is often referred to as a biopsychosocial spiritual model. And what it means is that spiral dynamics is this map that biologically shows us how we evolved biologically, how humanity has evolved for 250,000 years. It shows us psychologically how we've evolved, spiritually. And integral theory is the same idea. It's a map that shows how we have evolved in different territories of life, like our biology, like our psychology, like our spirituality, and also shows us the different ways that we can experience those different territories. So for me, it's just important to remember that it's not that something like spiral dynamics that shows us, think of yourself as literally holding up a map, like you're on vacation in a car, and it shows you how to get from A to B. It shows you what's along the way. It shows you what on the map you can see the difference in, Kansas, the state of Kansas is incredibly flat compared to the state of Colorado that has the Rocky Mountains, and you can see it on the map. And it's the same thing with a model of human development. It just shows you the terrain that we're going through. So we use it here in terms of religion and spirituality to help us see the territory that we're in, to help us see the different places, because they are stages of development. Whether you're talking 250,000 years of human development or you're talking about the life of an individual from 0 to whenever they die, we go through different phases or stages in life, and we get to see how beliefs change, how our thoughts change, how our culture changes, how our values change. And that's what we're holding on to.
Okay. And that's good. And I want to ask you, on the three faces of God, the experience of each of the three faces of God, are they available at every level of growth, at every stage of growth?
I think that they're the experience of how we define each of those faces. They're perspectives. We experience life through these perspectives, the I, you, we, or it. And so each of those are certainly available at any stage of our development, but I think they're available in different capacities. I think our focus is a little bit different, depending on what stage for it. So now I'll get a little bit around spiral dynamics. One of the stages in spiral dynamics is we call purple. And it's in human development. It's 50,000 years ago when humans were, magical thinking was coming on stage. There's the goddess. There's the nature. God is in all of nature. There's lots of that kind of thinking around spirituality and around religion. And so that third face of God, that big itness, that great web of life is very much alive and very much a focus. And so I think someone, at that stage, you can certainly experience all three faces, but where our focus is, the language that we have to describe it is going to be very different. And I know we'll launch more into this.
That's
Before
good.
I go too far off for you, I'll stop myself.
Oh, it's good. Well, we do want to spend most of the show talking about how we actually get there and how we know we get there, But before let's do one last little thing regarding Ken Wilber and Spiral before we go forward. And that just is, there's a lot of talk within Unity about, we really need to get to this second tier of consciousness. Everybody wants to get to the second tier that in Spiral, we call it the coral and the turquoise area. Yellow. And I heard you say once that getting to the second tier isn't really the goal. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I for myself and some of my colleagues that are kind of out and about teaching this, we really have this common experience that there's just a desire. I think there's a deep desire for humans to seek. For us to seek and to search and to find answers, to make meaning in life. And so when you look at something like spiral dynamics and you see that there's this, what we call quote unquote second tier, which is yellow and turquoise, and what that looks like and how it's defined, it sounds so evolved and it sounds so wonderful. And it sounds like, oh, that's where I want to be. I want to get to that because life is much better there. And so for me and many of my colleagues, that's not really what we're interested in or what we focus on. What our focus on is being enlightened at every stage that we go through in our development. It's being enlightened at whatever stage of development I find myself at, to have healing and wholeness everywhere along the way. And through that process, we will evolve and eventually grow into and evolve into second tier consciousness, but it's not the goal. It's about wholeness and healing and quote unquote enlightenment, as Don Beck calls it, at each level.
So you've mentioned several times, even in this conversation, that the experience is the key thing. It's not so much having the intellectual conversation about, but it's actually having the experience of. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how do we know that we're making spiritual progress, or how do we improve our levels of experience and awareness? What kind of techniques can we use, and how do we know we got there?
Well, see, It's a great question. And in part, it's a great question because just the very last thing you said, how do we know we got there? For me, there isn't a get there place. I'm not interested in a destination. I'm interested in a journey. Mm-hmm. And although it doesn't mean my journey doesn't have destinations, I think of it as a visual person. I kind of think of it as I'm on this, like, imagine a park, and there's this walking path that's winding through lots of different, sometimes it's just a field of flowers. Sometimes there's palm trees, there's a beach, there's forests. And so there's this path that winds along, and periodically there's benches, along my path. And so I'll stop and rest on my bench. And those are the kinds of what I would refer to as a destination, as opposed to really some end point. Mm-hmm. So, how do I know that I'm making spiritual progress? I guess my simplest answer was, am I kinder to myself? Am I kinder to you? Is there less drama in my life? Have I contributed to your life? Do I know that my presence here matters? Do you know that your presence here matters? And have I made a contribution for you to know that? Have I contributed in a way that gives a sense of humanity is thriving, not surviving, but thriving? And I guess that's, I'll come back to the simple piece of the kindness piece, the compassion, compassion for self, compassion for other. And that's, if I'm going to measure spiritual progress or spiritual growth, how do I know that I'm growing? That's, am I kinder to myself? Am I kinder to you? Am I kinder to earth? Do I see myself in you?
I love it. And each of those points that you just made, we will spend a little bit more time evolving in our next section when we're talking about the second phase and the first phase, because you talk a lot about that, about each of those phases. And we also want to talk a little bit about how you get there to experience. And, I heard you say once that every practice that we have to enhance our experience is a discipline, that it's sort of like exercising a muscle. That might be painful in the initial process, but we're happier after the fact and we reap the benefits. Can you tell me a little bit about that, what you mean?
Well, it's like going to the gym. I'm going to start lifting a 5-pound weight before I start lifting a 50-pound weight. And spiritual, developing spiritually is another muscle, just like we develop emotionally, we develop cognitively. We develop our intellect, we learn new things. And the same thing is true for our spiritual development. It's a practice. It's a discipline to know what's working for me in terms of, am I kinder to me? Am I kinder to you? It's a discipline, just like just like I'm working my physical body and I want health and wholeness physically in my body. I go to the gym. I'm disciplined in what I eat, when I sleep, what I do when I go to the gym, how I use my body, or too much, too little. And it's the same thing with our spiritual development, that it requires the same kind of discipline. And what am I doing in terms of meditation? And what am I doing in terms of, even intellectual understanding and reading of information, in my own searching, in my own stillness, in my own, whatever meditation looks like, whatever prayer looks like, whatever being of, contributing to spiritual communities, whatever that is. It doesn't matter to me. Contributing to another human being in terms of sacred service. They're all disciplines that harness my energy, that keep my energy focused, so that we don't have what Charles Fillmore calls dissipated energy, which just keeps us kind of scattered to the three winds.
I love it. I think we're going to break here in a minute, are we not?
Yeah, Jeff says we should have already gone to break, so let's do that.
Jeff.
I know, but it's such a good conversation. So we will take this quick break, listen to a few messages, and then come back to the three faces of God.
Unity Online Radio is bringing the message of unity to tens of thousands of spiritual seekers around the world. If you have been served by this programming, we invite you to support it by visiting www.unity.fm and clicking on Donate Now. Thank you for your support.
Hi, this is Ellen Davenport. The 5 Principles was my first book, and here's what I've learned as an author. It's nice to sell a lot of books, but it's truly gratifying to know the book is being read, used, and studied in churches and small groups in the U.S. and beyond. And I get a real kick out of hearing that someone gave the 5 Principles to friends who aren't in unity. Because the 5 Principles are universal spiritual laws. They operate in everyone's life, whether they know it or not. They've been discovered and rediscovered by spiritual masters for thousands of years. God is all there is. We are expressions of God. We create our experience with the power of our thoughts. We align ourselves with the well-being of the universe through prayer and meditation. And we live the truth we know every day in every decision. Just 5 Principles. They cover it all. Buy the book at unity.org.
Music Speaks Louder Than Words is an inspiring, informative, and fun hour of uplifting, heartfelt music and commentary that delivers a powerful message of love, joy, and oneness. It will keep you smiling and singing along. Your hosts, Reverends Dale Worley and Christy Snow, are alive with the Spirit of God and singing their love to you each Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central Time with Music Speaks Louder Than Words. Music. It's the only thing that the whole world listens to.
Music speaks louder than words when you sing.
You're listening to The 3 Faces of God, a special series with co-hosts Karen Kelly and Reverend Ellen Davenport. Join the discussion on Facebook and submit questions for upcoming shows. Now, back to The 3 Faces of God.
Okay.
We're back with The 3 Faces of God. Karen, you and Kelly are in the middle of a great conversation, so why don't you just go ahead?
Well, I'll tell you, I love this because talking to Kelly, she understands the intellectual aspect of all these of the 3 faces, and she understands the models and the maps. But most importantly, she really can talk about the experience. And I asked her the other day, I said, well, what if we had to give an ultimate benefit statement? What would be the benefit of embracing all these 3 faces of God? And she said, and I quote, she says, well, if we practice and experience each of these faces of God, we learn to go inward and downward into God and into the messiness of being fully human. And I love that because it goes back to what John Shelby Spong always says, that being aware of my divinity allows me to be fully human. And Kelly, I'm going to bounce the ball over to you and ask you to just expand on that a little bit. And doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to be right and yummy, does it?
No, quite the opposite. Actually, I going inward and downward to God was actually a phrase that I got from Parker Palmer many years ago out of his book, Let Your Life Speak. And for me, it's just as powerful a statement as ever. And it's expanded my life, and it's expanded my understanding. It's expanded my experience of the divine, my experience of the universe coming into manifest form, my experience of God, spirit, whatever word you want to use. And what it means for me is that we have lots and lots and lots of language and conversation around ascending, around being enlightened, around moving up. I mean, we were just talking about it before, about moving up the spiral, moving to higher levels of consciousness. There's all this conversation about up, higher, higher. And it's not untrue. It's just that there's more. And for me, the more is I want to move inward and downward to God, because that's where what that means to me is moving inward and downward into the human experience, the messiness of our human lives, because that's where God is made manifest in terms of where it's almost like most useful, really. You know, that first face of God that is, you know, that divine that's within each, you know, living entity, that is, when you talk about an experience of that, it's almost like the minute you start to put words on it, you can try to explain an experience of being in the silence and having that connection and some kind of experience with the allness and the beingness and this ever-present energy. But the minute you try to explain it, you sort of lose it along the way, which is okay, but it's really a very personal thing. And so, but it's important. We need it because it's what I then take to move into the second face of God, which in part is being God in manifest form with human beings. So going inward and downward to God means humbling myself, bowing down, kneeling down, being humble, surrender, whatever word I want to use, which is what I believe that Jesus modeled for us. That's the people he hung out with, you know, the prostitutes, the lepers, the poor, you know, which are the people that we may not notice along our path, the people that we may get off a highway and at the end of the exit is somebody with a cardboard sign and we immediately look the other direction. It's the people that we don't want to see that we need, that I'm suggesting we, in order to connect with, in order to be the divine quality of love, the divine quality of compassion in action, requires me to humble myself and literally bow down and be devoted to whoever's in front of me. So it's an inward, that's why I call it an inward and downward.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're saying the relationship with God that is the second face.
Yes.
Is not just talking to God, it is the way we relate to all of God's creation, to each other, to the earth.
It is for me, and I'll get choked up about it. It is, I'll try not to get too choked up. It is the way, it is one of the most powerful experiences of God, that second face, because it's not just intellectually and theoretically, and most of the conversation has been around talking to this God outside of myself, to asking for help, to even humbling myself. I get down on my knees and I surrender. I can't do this alone. And the way that I look at it is that is certainly part of it, and a large part of it. When we as humans reach a point in our day with an experience in our life where we're so lost, we're so confused, we're so angry, we're so beaten down, whatever it is, and we literally or figuratively fall to our knees and say, I can't do this anymore, I need help. Very often it is to an outside entity, and it's because we as humans want to know that our presence here matters. We want to know that we're loved. We want to know that we're seen for who we are. And so that initial step is certainly that relationship with God that is that second face that you guys have been talking about. But where I really feel it and know it and embody it is when another soul, a human, walks into my life and is all of those things in expression, is that human that reminds me that I matter, that human that says, of course we love you. Of course you're loved. And not just loved by a God out here, but I love you. And now I have a God with skin on, as it were, in this person in front of me. That's that dash, that I thou, and that dash in between. It's the activity. That's what the second face of God is the activity. The verb of God is the second face of God. I love it.
Okay, and relating to the divine in others is part of that second face.
Yes,
knowing
absolutely.
that they are divine. Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you. That's very helpful for me.
Absolutely.
And
Another way. Go ahead.
I just want to interject a thought. I think that in each of these faces of God, we can have an obstacle in the way to our experience and to experience the goodness and the richness of it. And especially in the second phase, those of us who came from a traditional church background and perhaps the second phase was misused perhaps in a powerful way of judgment and how do you like to say it, Ellen? I'm a worm in the dust.
Yeah.
Or, I'm God and you're not, so to speak. It occurs to me the farther we go into this discussion that we really can reframe the conversation. We really can reframe what the second phase means, and we can leave behind that which doesn't work. So it's not whether something is right or wrong, but is it useful or not useful? So the way that you're discussing, Kelly, now, how you approach the second phase of God in another's eyes or in another's compassion, and you said, I can be in the human experience with the other, the power of God being tangible, is maybe a new way to look that, Ellen or my background didn't show us, because we're experiencing it. We don't need a priest. We don't need a Bible. We don't need a collection plate or anything else to get the benefits. It's the experience. So
here's the catch to that is it also depends on your stage of development, which we said at the very beginning, because for many people in, say, traditional Christianity, the stage of development, which is the what we would call mythical or absolutist, is that it is through Jesus. It is through that Jesus will save me from my sins. That there is that that is the second face of God. That it's through this other entity that I am shown the way of goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's working for you, great. I don't, what do I know? I would never presuppose. It's just when it no longer is, as you said, working for you, that we move into, then you move to the next stage, which is that seeking, what we call orange and spiral, and you're seeking to find, the new answers, that you kind of move out of this other entity or the collection plate or the Bible. But there's, so that's why the faces, like we said at the beginning of the show, these three faces can look and be experienced in different ways as we move through our, as our faith develops, as our beliefs develop, as our, emotions, as our spiritual understanding develops.
And is it not true, Kelly, that sometimes the more we practice each of these faces and experiencing them, we sort of realize that we grew in hindsight, huh? I mean,
Yes.
We look in the rearview mirror and say, wow. Reverend Ed Townley always says it's the huh factor. We look back and you go, huh.
Yeah.
Look, I didn't act that way before. I didn't act that way again.
Yeah.
I must have grown. So we grow into higher levels the more we practice, and we're not necessarily seeking, but we're practicing, and a benefit of practicing is that we elevate our awareness and our consciousness. Would that be a true statement?
Say that one more time. I'm not sure. I think we're always seeking. I know. I think we're always seeking. As human beings, it's in our nature to be seeking, and not like necessarily 100% of the time, but there's always this paradox of that I'm perfect just the way that I am. I'm born perfect and whole, and I need to transform. And what do I need to change and grow and transform? And I'm perfect just the way that I am, and the beingness, which is the same paradox that we have with God, that shows up in each of the faces. That God is this allness, this beingness, this unchanging, and God is always expressing and always evolving, which is the unchanging piece of God. That there's always this infinite, diverse number of ways that God shows up constantly.
And these are all tools that help us experience a richer relationship with and as and about the divine. And we don't necessarily experience them or practice them perfectly. Right?
No, God, I hope not, because that would mean I'd be done, and I'm not interested in being done. Mm-hmm. I almost feel like I'm talking in circles. The experience is always an ongoing unfolding that I need. One of the ways to look at it is, this first face of God. This is the way of the heart, so to speak. That we talk about the heart as an intuitive, a place of, a sacred sanctuary of wisdom. So there's the way of the heart. And the third face is about, truth, that is principle, that is this great web, that universal knowing. It has an itness, it's not a personal thing. Right? It has an itness quality to it. And so it becomes the way of knowledge or the way of the intellect. And then the second face becomes what I said, goodness. It becomes the way of goodness, the way of action, of putting the other two faces into, so it shows up for you. So the practice that having an experience is, other than the practice of prayer and the practice of meditation, I'm going to direct you to the faith tradition that you are, active within. And what are the ways that you practice within your faith tradition?
And you're a perfect straight man here, because I wanted to go into I just forgot what I was going to say. Damn it! Excuse me, I can't say that on the air.
Well, apparently you can.
Darn it! Excuse me, listeners. I don't know what I was going to say. I'm sorry. I just lost it. But
I can jump in with a couple.
Jump in, please. Here. Yeah. Oh, prayer and meditation. I'll come back to it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm still back on where we said the second phase, which is relationship with God, includes seeing the divine in other people and how we relate to other people. Mm-hmm. It's being God. It's living as the divine. So now I'm confused about what the first phase is, which is the divine in us.
Also recognizing the divine in others, the divine other, the awareness.
Well, so the second phase for me is the verb, which is why I use the word goodness. You can even think about the three faces in terms of, the values of beauty, truth, and goodness. Goodness being the second face. And all their perspectives, remember their perspectives. We experience our life as human beings mostly through these three perspectives, through the I, you, like me and another, and then we, or it. And so it makes sense that we would experience God in the same way. And so the second face, for me, in the experience of God, becomes the verb. That activity. So the first face is certainly that I am, that divine quality, that divine nature within each of us, and or in unity, as we would say, the immanent. God is immanent. That quality is within all life, and then it becomes moving that quality from interior to exterior. So it becomes that verb. It becomes the dynamic aspect of God, as opposed to just an immanent principle that is alive within us. It now becomes, what traditional Christianity would call the Holy Spirit, but it becomes the creating. It becomes the understanding, the dynamism, the movement. That's why I keep saying verb.
I like that. I think that, Ellen and I were having this discussion offline a couple of weeks ago, and it just came to me that when we in the first person talk about being oneness and being all of what God is, it's inside of me, but I am not all of God, so to speak. And I know there's some disagreement about this. I know we can go round and round, but what I loved the concept for me to hold is that I'm fully God and I'm fully human. I am a complete drop in the ocean, but I'm not the entire ocean. I am the oneness appreciating the wholeness. I am fully connected and I'm fully all of that, but I'm not all of the examples, all of the outpicturing, all of, and it helps me get my ego out of the way, and realize that when my ego is in play in my material, in my manifest world, I am blocking all that I can be, all of my relative blocks my absolute, so to speak. Our goal is to have the absolute flowing through the relative. But I still am showing up as fully God, but I'm not all of God. So my connecting with the second phase, go ahead.
It's supposed to block. It's not, if here's how it works, is that we have this understanding that we the first phase, we recognize God in everything that we see and everything that we touch, that there's this divine, quality, divine nature that is us, and we recognize the third phase. In Unity, we would say immanent. And then we recognize the third phase, where God is this transcendent, this absolute mystery, this great web of life, this, this unchanging beingness. And and it's from that we, the minute, and so there's this, for lack of a better word, this cosmic bloodstream that's flowing through each of us. And the minute that I make it, which is sort of like going from the third phase into the first phase, so there's this unknowable absolute mystery that then is made, we're aware of in each living creature, that then comes into manifest form as the second phase. But the minute that I do that, I'm supposed to collapse. Think quantum physics. There's this wave of infinite possibility, like the third phase of God, right? Is this infinite possibility, the allness of the suchness of the beingness, right? That the minute you try to use words, you've just lost it. That we then, in quantum, you go from this wave of infinite possibilities, and you pull one particle out. Yes. And you pull one particle, which is joy, which is love, which is compassion, which is faithfulness, which is pick a divine quality, and we bring that into manifest form. So yes, I am blocking the rest of it, but I'm supposed to be, because I'm focused, and what I'm wanting is to express joy. I'm wanting to express belonging. I'm wanting to express compassion. I'm pulling a particle out of a wave, and at any given moment, I pull a different particle. It's what, in Unity, what we call divine order.
Oh boy, you have given us something perfect to go out to our second break, and a lead into the third section, where we start talking about the first face of God and the principle and versus the practice. I'm loving it. Shall we say
we'll be
goodbye?
Back after these messages. Yeah, not goodbye, just we'll be back.
With childlike wonder, what is the nature of God? Who is Jesus? What is the Christ? How do we know what we know? When you ask these or other heart-centered questions about the non-physical, intangible aspects of life, you are, on some level, a student of metaphysics. New from Unity House and nearly 5 years in the making, Heart-Centered Metaphysics, a deeper look at Unity teachings, is now available. This is Paul Hasselbeck, author of this quintessential study guide. Enjoy a deeper exploration of universal spiritual principles and truths, whether you're just starting or have been seeking for years. Each thought-provoking chapter of Heart-Centered Metaphysics speaks to truth seekers like you, providing essential tools to help elevate your consciousness and create spiritual transformations in your outer life and circumstances. Order your copy today from the Unity online store at www.unity.org. Then click on Shop.
Are you ready for deeper spiritual breakthroughs? Have you wondered how to apply spiritual principles to your everyday life in practical ways? Do you feel your soul is calling you to deeper purposes? Join Reverend Galen McDowell live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central for Truth Transforms, a discussion on how God within you, as you, is the power to transform your life. If you really believe that consciousness determines your experiences and that you are an individualized expression of God, join us as we help awaken and transform the consciousness of humanity. We will discuss, through lecture, live interviews, and call-in questions, spiritual healing, prayer, prosperity, forgiveness, new thought views about eternal life, and much more. The world is waiting for your truth transformation, only on Unity Online Radio. Three Faces of God. Here are your hosts, Karen Kelly and Ellen Davenport.
Welcome back to the Three Faces of God. We're having a really thoughtful conversation with our guest, Kelly Isola. Remember that we have a Facebook page called Three Faces of God, where you can go and leave comments and ask questions, and we would love to hear how this is working for you. Is it making sense? Are you able to incorporate it into your own spiritual thinking and your spiritual experience? And we're talking particularly today about experience. What's up next? Prayer?
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about one of the tools in helping us realize and experience the second face of God. And talk about a little bit about prayer, Kelly, as far as how prayer can be useful, whether it's contemplative or it's beseeching or it's thankful prayer. Before you respond to this, I'll just take a second to read something Myrtle Fillmore wrote in her book on healing. She wrote that when Jesus said, "When you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret," which is Matthew 6:6. And she says, "The inner chamber is that quiet place within the heart. We are taught to center our thoughts within and to shut that door, that is, to close our minds to all other thinking and to think about God and His goodness and His love, to pray to God in secret, in that secret place of the Most High, is where all things needful will be added." And then she writes, she quotes Alfred Lord Tennyson, who says, "Speak to him, thou, for he hears, and spirit with spirit can meet. Closer is he than breathing, and nearer than hands and feet." So talk to us of prayer, wise one.
Yeah, it was Ellen you meant, right? Wise one?
No, you're up. You're the guest.
Yeah, so, prayer comes in lots of different forms. And so a way to experience the three faces of God through the practice of prayer would be for the first person. So I'm going to stick within sort of our Christian roots. And what I would invite anybody listening is to actually return to your own roots, whatever those may be, your genealogy. And so I'm going to use, Christianity as an example. So the first person is we've heard the phrase before, putting on the mind of Christ. So prayer is in the silence, is our time, and not quiet, but in the silence, which again becomes a discipline. Anytime that you read Charles Fillmore or Myrtle Fillmore and they talk about the silence, or as you just read, Karen, about going in, closing the door, it's not just quiet. It truly is a silence. It's a different state, which means it's beyond, our conscious mind. But putting on the mind of Christ and the experience of it's almost like you can explain the experience after the fact, that it's no longer I, but the Christ in me. And having the understanding of that, and having that experience. And so that would be, in our silence, in our stillness and in our silence, putting on the mind of Christ. And it can be just being aware of whatever's arising around you and realizing that you're not that.
Okay. That's a good point. I think we're getting a little bit into what we want to talk about with the first face as well. I'd like to just back up before we leave second.
I was just talking about the first face.
Right.
Okay.
But I just want to I want to visit prayer, because in Unity, we talk about prayer, we talk about meditation. And when we read Wilber or we read Paul Smith's book, we're talking about prayer actually being a relational exercise, and meditation being an experience of ourselves being the divine. It is an experiential oneness. You can't pray your way into experiencing oneness theoretically, although I guess at the highest level of practice, these all merge together and they're one and the same. But for those of us who are, we're talking about the three faces, prayer is a relationship. It's thank you, God. It's help me, God. It's I love the God in you. It is I, thou. It is the other vehicle. Yeah? Where meditation is the experience of being God and being one with God. And you find that God deep in the stillness. Can the stillness also be a place for contemplative prayer?
Yes. I'm not sure what. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Contemplative prayer.
Okay. Contemplative prayer is not meditation, however. Right? Would you agree?
No, not necessarily. Depends on who you're asking.
Yeah.
So yes, contemplative prayer is prayer and it's meditation. So prayer is also an experience. If one of the ways to experience prayer in the second face of God is through song, through writings, reading writings. It's not just saying a prayer like "Dear God." It's also through writings, any mystical writings. We have this, we're reading, someone else's experience and we're connecting with it. It's also singing, singing songs where we are connecting with others in this praise of God that's alive becomes a second face experience of prayer. That for me, singing is praying. So that's for me one example of experience. There's different ways to experience.
It could also be art. It could be art. It could be music. It could be other things. Dance could all be forms of prayer. Could they not?
Well, art becomes much more subjective, where it becomes much more eye-centered and is more likely to be a first-person experience. Whereas singing with a group of people is more of a we, you and me together, and it becomes very much, just this practice of being with each other and experiencing God with each other, when we're singing particular worship songs, like in a Sunday service, and how that comes alive for us and how we feel the joy, and we feel God come alive when we're singing together. Something like art is more of an individual personal experience. Yes,
okay.
Ellen.
Miss
Ellen. I was just going to say, we have 1 minute left.
Yep.
I know. It's terrible.
And, I'm looking for a recipe on how to experience the three faces of God. So tell me something like, do 10 minutes of meditation and 3 prayers and take a walk in nature,
Okay.
How do we get there?
Well, kind of what I was saying, that the first person is, so do 10 minutes of prayer, of putting on the mind of Christ. And if it needs to be something like Lectio Divina, where you take one sentence or one word out of the Bible and just meditate on that by yourself and put that on like a jacket. And then the second phase is go sing songs of praise and worship with another person and feel yourself come alive and feel the energy of God between you, as a practice, and do it every day if you want, or do it once a week, however often, but I would do it every day, or put a song on on your CD and sing along with it. The third phase, you just said, go stand out in nature. Absolutely. Meditate, go outside somewhere that you love in nature, the beach, the woods, whatever, and just meditate on the absolute perfection of the moment that is, and finding yourself in that greater picture that you're sitting within. But really, it's a silent practice of the absolute perfection of what is around you. It's not a personal thing. It's an itness. It's the life energy.
I love it.
Perfect. That's a perfect wrap up, isn't it?
It is.
And we're out of time again.
Oh, Kelly.
Time goes so fast. Kelly, thank you so much, Kelly Isola, for being with us today and helping us understand this behind the scenes too. We will be back next week with Robert Brummett, who is on the faculty at Unity Institute. And I think we'll talk a lot about prayer and meditation next week with him, won't we?
And a lot about first person. Yep.
First person, the divine within. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with the three faces of God.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to The Three Faces of God with Karen Kelly and Reverend Ellen Davenport. This is a 6-week special series about understanding the divine in different ways. This program is brought to you in part by EllenDavenport.com and by Unity of Wimberley, Texas, online at unityofwimberley.com. Whether you love the Bible or hate it, turn to it daily or refuse to have it in your house, The Bible Alive, Exploring Your Spiritual Roadmap is a program designed just for you. Unity Minister Rev Ed Townley presents the Bible as a practical, powerful spiritual roadmap full of wisdom and guidance for the challenges of life today. A roadmap for your spiritual journey. Isn't that just what you're seeking? Listen live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central Time for The Bible Alive, Exploring Your Spiritual Roadmap with Rev Ed Townley. Only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
In quiet moments of prayer, let go of any concern. Anchor your trust deep in the realization that with God all things are possible. Never doubt it for a single moment.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.
Have you heard about Dr. Tom Shepard's new program on Unity Online Radio?
Tom Shepard, isn't he the Unity Magazine question and answer guy?
Right. Well, they've actually turned him loose with a radio show, and I hear it's going to be pretty edgy.
Edgy? Like what?
Guest panelists and students from Unity Institute and Seminary. Topics like abortion, gay marriage, war and peace, environmental issues, Islamic fundamentalism, universal health care, religion and politics, current events.
Yeah, but they'll all be Unity people, right?
Dr. Tom and his students will talk about the hard questions facing all people today, sometimes joined by rabbis, priests, liberal and conservative ministers, Buddhist monks, Baha'is, Hindus.
And he's going to interview them on the program?
Better, he's going to introduce a controversial topic and let students and special guests go for it.
This could get explosive. Does he have guys in black shirts standing by to break up the fights?
If I know Dr. Tom, he will keep it both friendly and spirited.
Whoa, I gotta hear this. When and where?
The program is called Let's Talk About It, and it's on every Thursday at 9 a.m. Central Time, only on Unity Online Radio. So let's talk about it.
Definitely, let's.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together we...
Celebrated Unity minister and author Eric Butterworth tells us, the exciting thing is that wherever you may be along the way of unfoldment and self-realization, no matter what the problems or challenges you may face, there is always more in you, the mystery of God in you, the Christ in you, which means your potential for healing, for overcoming, for prosperity. There is no limit. Join us each week for Discovering Eric Butterworth, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Central Time with host Reverend Tom Thorpe, right here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
Living